What's going down, guys? We got another video, and this one is Nintendo is going back to making Switch 1 games. Really? Let's check this out.
So one of my favorite things about the Nintendo Switch 2 launching was that I did not have to play my Nintendo Switch 1 anymore. Now look, I enjoyed the system. I have a lot of fond memories of the system. The system definitely helped catapult this channel and helped, make me money and stuff like that because myself and others took a chance on covering Nintendo Switch 1 stuff when a lot of people were hesitant to cover Nintendo stuff after the Wii U. So I'm definitely very grateful for the system, but I mean, I was talking about, 2 or 3 years into his existence, I was kind of like, the technology just isn't quite hitting. Like, yes, there were impressive games from Nintendo and from third-party companies, but then there were first-party games that had substantial performance issues. Lots of third-party games that had substantial performance issues.
Listen, I gotta say this. The Switch, in my opinion, is one of the best systems ever made from um, an IP standpoint, from the games that they put out first party. That thing was a banger. And I'm looking at it from a gamer's perspective, not necessarily just a AAA gamer's perspective, because we all know the Switch and that Tegra chip was, outdated and it was, well past its prime. But as far as the games that they were able to make and on that system, very great games, very good games on there, nice library. And the Switch 2 still has a lot to live up to as far as their IPs are concerned, in my opinion. They got a lot to work on. But let's not go that far when it comes to the Switch 1. But anyway, let's continue.
So with the Nintendo Switch 2, the gap has definitely closed between the Nintendo Switch 2 and other platforms out there, but I'm glad that I don't have to worry about it anymore. And one thing that a lot of people were focused in on, and Nintendo themselves were focused in on, was shifting their game development resources to the Nintendo Switch 2. No more Switch 1 games or anything like that. It's all going to be Switch 2, and well, it seems like plans might have changed a little bit. There is the upcoming potential launch for the Switch 1 in a brand new region 10 years after it has released, and then in the investors Q&A report, Furukawa himself had some very interesting things to say about Nintendo Switch 1 software and why it's not going away anytime soon. And it's definitely something that is concerning. But maybe I could see a little bit of a silver lining with this. Maybe there is some positivity to take away from this that maybe some people aren't necessarily considering. First time on the channel, hit that subscribe button, pal. But let's just talk about this. So Nintendo is entering a new region with the Nintendo Switch 1 in 2027, 10 years after the launch of the system, and it's India. Now, I don't know much about India. I know there are a lot of people that live in India. I know that there is curry in India, and I do enjoy curry and stuff like that. I've had some Indian neighbors over the past few years, and I enjoyed their company and their customs and their food. But India is a very, very large region, and India right now technically has a gray market for the Nintendo Switch 1, meaning that it's not like sold in stores and stuff like that as far as like major stores are concerned. Well, a podcast called Day Zero, which I have no idea who they are, has made a claim that Nintendo will be breaking into the Indian market in early 2027 with the original Nintendo Switch. Now, take this for a grain of salt, but so many people are running with this story that there must be some sort of merit to the people that are making these claims. So I feel comfortable enough to talk about it, but, it might not be a reality. So if you live in India and you're watching this video, don't get mad at me if this doesn't come to fruition, but they have a timetable of February or March. They have a price of 20,000 rupees, not Legend of Zelda rupees. Get your mind out of the Zelda world. This is the Indian rupee, which roughly translates to about $210 or so.
I mean, that's a pretty decent price for a Switch 1. And let's keep it real. I think the Switch sold about 3.7, 3.8 million copies this past year. So they're still selling Switches. And that just goes to show you how awesome of a system the Switch still is, and the library of games that you can get on here. And I'm not even talking about the eShop games, the indie games that they have on there. My backlog is ridiculous with the indie games that I have on my Switch 1. And that's why I never felt a need to get a Switch 2 yet, because I mean, to be honest with you, they don't have any games that just I would call a system seller yet. You know, everybody's looking for that next Mario game, everybody's looking for that next Zelda game. Those are two games right there. If you want to sell the console, you want to come, you want to come with something like that. Uh, Outside of that, man, for me, it's just not. It's a no go. Now, I'm sure you guys have other opinions. Nintendo players out there may have games like Tomodachi Life and the likes of those Pokemon games, and that's your, that's your thing. Hey, do your thing. I'm just, I don't play Pokemon, and I was never into the other game, but it is what it is. But it just goes to show you that this system still has a lot of life left in it. And if you're looking at it from just a gamer's perspective, somebody who just likes to play games, you're not thinking about, oh, what are the system, what are the graphics, what are the specs of this. You just really want to know, is this game fun? Is this game cool? And there you go. Easy way you can do that is test it on kids. Like you could test like I did this with my son with my Dreamcast. Like we played certain games, and I just sat back and see if he got enjoyment out of it, because they're not looking at it like we're looking at it, right? They're not spoiled by what's out here. He's just gonna play what is fun to him. And there were games that we were playing, and we were playing them for hours because they were just fun games, right? We didn't care how old they were. We didn't care about all of that. Was the game appeasing enough to play to where you could sink hours and hours and hours into it? And it was. And I think that's the same recipe that Nintendo knows that it has, okay, with the Switch. And you got to think also, they have millions and millions, I think over 100 and something million of these things in the wild right now. So, of course, there's going to be new audiences still discovering this.
And I guess they're just going to release the Nintendo Switch 1 in this region. And you might be saying, well, why are they doing that? Because of economics. If you're releasing it for 20,000 rupees into this region, like, yes, 200 plus American dollars in there. I don't know, like, the rupee to like what the average wage is for rupees and stuff like that. But within Indian media, it's kind of being positioned as like a potentially more premium item and stuff like that. So I think it's just a way to get more sales of this. This is an untapped market for you. All of these companies want to get into markets that they are not into. Companies want to get into China and stuff like that because that's an untapped market with people, potential customers that can buy their stuff. So if Nintendo is, putting the Switch 1 out in India in 2027, 10 years after the system launch, it's obvious that like they still have faith in this little guy. They still want this little guy to be successful. And when you kind of start to think about what the price of the Switch 1 is in other regions, such as the United States right now, we, of course, have seen price increases for the Switch 1 in several different territories. Maybe it makes sense to go into a marketplace where you could get a whole new, area of customers that you did not have access to before, instead of trying to sell the hardware that you have sitting there right now that has now gone up in price that people just aren't interested in. So I think it's an interesting balance here. But like I said, that's not the only sort of proof that the Switch 1 isn't dying, because, well, Furukawa himself pretty much said it. So in this investors meeting, somebody was asking about Mario Kart World, because Mario Kart World sales, since the bundle has ended, have kind of dropped substantially. That $80 price point isn't exactly the most attractive thing for a lot of people. Obviously, they are doing another bundle very soon, the Choose Your Own Adventure bundle, where you can get Mario Kart World and a Nintendo Switch 2 once again for $500 for like the next 2 months starting in June. Or if you're a smart person, you can get the RGT bundle, available on Amazon right now. Link in the description box down below. You can get a Nintendo Switch 2 and a physical copy of Star Fox for $500. The best bundle going on the market. Be sure to use my affiliate link. But when asked about this, Furukawa had to say the following, and well, it's kind of interesting. While I will refrain from talking about the state of sales for individual titles, Mario Kart World is an important title that we would like to continue selling through the life cycle of the Nintendo Switch 2. Going forward, we will continue to convey its appeal to consumers to expand its popularity as an evergreen title. So far, so good. That's where you should have ended the statement. Everyone would have been happy with that, but then he goes on to say, I believe it is important that we consider how to expand the entire software business, including titles for both Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2, instead of only focusing on sales of Nintendo Switch 2 software. Well, wait a gosh darn minute here, pal. Didn't you say that all the resources were going to Nintendo Switch 2 only games? You were leaving the Switch 1 in the past? Why are we back to this now? Why are we back to the old crusty boy? Why is the crusty boy getting some looks now and some life left in him? I don't like the sound of that, and many people won't be too pleased with the sound of that. We bought the Switch 2 because we didn't want to play Switch 1 games anymore. Now, obviously, there have been some titles that have released for both the Switch 1 and the Switch 2, or smaller titles that have come out for the Switch 1. But saying that you're reconsidering, what you're doing and, wanting to focus potentially on different things, like, I don't know, man. That sounds a little bit weird, or does it? Because I do think that there is a potential silver lining with this statement, and maybe something that many people aren't considering. So when you look at the software for Switch 1 thus far that has come out since the launch of the Switch 2, you've had stuff like Tomodachi Life, you have the upcoming Rhythm Heaven game, Metroid Prime 4, which was in development hell, and then nobody bought it. Don't get mad at me for saying the obvious. Get mad at yourself for not buying the game. I bought the game. I bought it.
All that
Did
from what
you?
I hear, guys.
Because the sales say otherwise. I'm just saying. But when you look at those games, obviously they were in development for a very long time. So you wouldn't want like, oh, here's a new Mario game for the Switch 1 that's going to be handicapped by the performance issues of the Switch 1 with maybe a Switch 2 visual upgrade and stuff like that. But if you take away that sort of mentality and think about what this could potentially be, I think it becomes a little bit more palpable. Palpable? What's the word? I think it's palpable. It's a little bit easier to digest. It's a little bit easier to accept this. And that would be kind of something that they did with this system that I think would make more sense. Things like smaller, like remasters, not remakes, remasters. Like, for instance, Tears of the King, or not Tears of the Kingdom, sorry, Twilight Princess HD for the Switch 1, Wind Waker HD for the Switch 1. You don't need to reinvent the wheel with those games. Those games already exist on the Wii U. You simply bring those versions over, you make it so that the controls don't have to factor in the Wii U gamepad, and then you have a great HD version of the game that will run at 1080p on the Switch 1, 4K on the Switch 2. It'll still look good. It'll still play good. And you're giving, Switch 1 customers something to pick up.
Listen, I'm not surprised that this is happening because there are just too many Switch 1s in the wild for Nintendo to ignore that. You can't ignore all those Switches, all the people who are still trying to get a Switch 2 or still waiting, but decided to hold back because of the price hike, which is now $500. Okay, after taxes, $560, you know what I mean? Something like that. So you got to take that into account. And as a business, you can't be naive to that. You have to be smart about that. You can't alienate all of these millions and millions of Switch 1 owners out here who still haven't got a Switch 2. Okay, it's going to take years and it's going to take some time for the Switch 2 to actually sell all of those. And like I said, part of it was because what I talked about earlier in the video. A lot of people are waiting. There haven't been games to make them say, okay, it's worth me paying $500+ to own this system right now. It's just not, especially when you have other game systems out here and you have other things going on. For me, the Switch was always a sidekick system for me, right? It was always, that passenger side system to the PlayStation for me. Everybody has their own. It may be with the Xbox for other people. And there are some people out there who, have Switch as their number one system. And so those are the people who I think bought the Switch and who took the time out to get the Switch 2 first. And we're trying to get them first. So those guys, those diehard Nintendo fans, and that's perfectly fine. But that's why Nintendo's going this route. So I'm sure they're going to get creative. They've always been pretty creative when it comes to IPs and stuff that they come up with for, the Switch 1 and the Switch 2, right? So you're going to have, a dumbed down version and you're going to have, you know, a superior version. And I think that's just what's going to happen, because you don't want to alienate the Switch 1 fan. So I'm cool with that. You know, like I said, I don't plan on getting a Switch 2 anytime soon. The soonest may be Christmas, and that just depends on my son, who claims he wants a Switch 2 for Christmas, but we'll see what happens. Outside of that, that'll be when I get it. If not, then who knows when. But anyway, that's going to do it for the video, guys. I want to thank everybody for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. I drop content on a regular basis on this channel now, so please subscribe. And with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video.